The banana is back, and this time it wants to eat your sandwich. Soul felt too mean. Hey Spuds, it's Jamie. Welcome back to another video if that's on our channel. I don't know, but welcome either way. Today, I'm very intrigued, excited, interested to talk to you about trans rep in film and TV, specifically more negative trans rep in film and TV. And I will be coming at you with a more positive video at some point, but I wanted to explore the more negative because it was more in the past and I like things to be linear. Yay. Now, I think we can all agree that media has such a huge amount of power to help form people's opinions on things and shape their minds in certain ways, and just generally develop attitudes towards communities, people, topics, things, whatever. Media is massively powerful within society. And when it comes to media, in terms of film and TV, and anything actually, but today we're specifically looking at film and TV, trans people have historically always been given the very shitty end of the stick. We are seeing improvements now in the last 10-ish years, but even still now, and then particularly in like the 80s, 90s, noughties, and the 2010s, we saw some examples of awful transphobia in film and TV. And before the representation was bad, it was non-existent. A really well-known negative portrayal is Silence of the Lambs, that I and many other people believe did push forward the misconception that trans women are inherently dangerous to cis women. Whether this was unintentional or not, it happened. Although it's been stated that Buffalo Bill is not trans, the assumptions were made and the damage was already done. The majority of audience members will not remember Clarice Starling and Hannibal discussing how Bill isn't trans. Instead, they'll remember a weirdo serial killer dancing around in women's clothes, which is the most important argument to be made about why the Silence of the Lamb movie is received as transphobic. The scene where Buffalo Bill dances in feminine clothing is incredibly memorable, partially because of the catchy song Goodbye Horses, and effectively highlights the offensive aspects of the film's villain. And this portrayal added to other instances where killers and villains had been seen dressing up as women and committing bad acts, such as Norman Bates in Psycho. Both movies are incredibly large classics that have had a big impact on culture throughout the years. And what both of these examples actually do is highlight the genuine threat, and that's predatory cis men. Although something they do get wrong is there is no evidence suggesting that these dangerous cis men are pretending or dressing up as women in order to carry out their dangerous acts. Instead, as we see generally in society, instead of blaming the true villains, trans women are used as scapegoats. And as I mentioned earlier, the powerful impact that media has really does shape people's opinions and attitudes towards certain groups within society, trans people being one of those groups. It's been found that viewing negative portrayals of trans people leads to the most negative attitudes towards trans people, compared with those who viewed positive portrayals who had the most positive attitudes towards trans people. It's almost as if transphobes aren't transphobic because there's actually anything wrong with being trans, but they're transphobic because they've been taught to be. That is definitely the case. And portrayal type doesn't just impact attitudes towards trans people, but also impacts trans people themselves, with more exposure to negative trans content being linked to poorer mental health outcomes amongst trans people. With film and TV having this level of power, and this power also extending to news outlets, celebrity statements and comments, etc., it highlights the importance of fair, accurate, and positive representation for trans people within media, because it really has the power to cause social change and increase social acceptance of a marginalized community. For the rest of the video, I want to go over some stats about portrayals of trans people in film and TV throughout the 2000s and the 2010s, and then have a look at some specific examples and break down why they're so problematic. GLAAD is a media monitoring organization that works to counter discrimination of the LGBT+ community in media. They publish some stats about trans rep throughout the years, and generally away from just this, they are also a pretty great organization, so go check them out. But since 2002, GLAAD has catalogued 102 episodes and non-recurring storylines of transgender characters. 54% were categorized as showing negative representation at the time they were aired. 35% were categorized as ranging from problematic representation to good representation, and only 12% of this representation was categorized as being groundbreaking, fair, and accurate. That's pretty abysmally low. Over half of the representation was categorized as negative. And then the next biggest chunk was like, as kind of problematic to it's okay. Wow. These offensive and negative representations at the time were found to be across every major broadcasting network. So the misrepresentation of trans people is incredibly widespread. For a lot of people, their first bit of knowledge, their first interaction, the first time they come across a trans person will be in media like film and TV. And if that representation is negative or paints trans people as devious or dangerous and provides that kind of misinformation and those wrong stereotypes, then what is is that person gonna walk away thinking about the trans community? Interestingly, in a very bad way, the trans community, who make up roughly 1% of the population, were found to be cast as killers or villains in 21% of the representation that GLAAD found. Over a fifth of the time the trans representation was seen in episodes and storylines, the trans person was a villain or a killer. Both. That seems so disproportionately high for a community within society that is so tiny and absolutely no greater risk or no more likely to be dangerous than the other 99%. In 61% of the examples found, there were anti-trans slurs and dialogue present, which is a very high proportion of the time, and it just indicates like,
oh hey, my favorite character used this slur, that must be fine for me to do that as well.
Especially if you've not had any information from any other sources saying that that's not okay and that causes harm. From transgender serial killers to murdered trans people being mocked, to characters being disgusted, to sometimes vomiting when they found out another character was trans or they'd been intimate with a trans person. Trans people really have had some pretty shit representation over the past few decades. And as well as being disproportionately shown as being violent or being murderers, transphobic jokes have been used for cheap laughs since forever. Apparently it's hilarious to be transphobic, and it's actually shocking as a 31-year-old trans person watching back on shows and movies that I watched as a child and a teenager, the amount of just slurs to outright transphobia to just derogatory and uncomfortable language used to describe trans people that is just so prevalent and so interwoven throughout a vast majority of the TV shows and films and the big cultural TV shows and films that we all love and know, like Friends, for example. It's just like for decades and decades and decades, people have been drip fed this notion that trans people are dangerous, deceptive, disgusting, gross, weird, scary, and that it's okay to use slurs and derogatory language when discussing trans people. There's been a great deal of dehumanizing done to the trans community within film and TV, and that's a hell of a lot of unlearning for the rest of society to do who've been consuming this media and perhaps not consuming any positive trans media whatsoever. So I thought now we could go over some examples of this transphobia that I've been talking about in film and TV and just break down why it's problematic specifically. Yay. But before we have a look at some examples, I want to give a little positive note. So talking of trans rep in film and TV, have you heard of The Matrix? Described as a metaphor for being trans by the directors, the Wachowski sisters, who are both trans women and came out after the original trilogy was made. I personally am a very big fan of The Matrix. But did you know that if you are in Australia, you cannot watch The Matrix on Netflix? Boo, how sad. That should not be legal. But you can if you're in the UK and US, so all hope is not lost. And I have just the cure for anyone who is not based in the UK or USA and cannot access The Matrix on Netflix. A red pill, if you like. Or maybe I should say a shark. How does it sound if you could be able to unlock content from different countries, keep your data secure, get the best prices online, and free your mind? Internet use. Thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Now back to The Matrix. Now as I mentioned, you can watch The Matrix in the UK or USA on Netflix, but not Australia. Now I love The Matrix, so if my butt is all the way over in Australia, but I want the home comforts of watching Neo dodge bullets in slow motion, what am I supposed to do? Luckily, Surfshark isn't just great at riding the digital waves. It also lets me change my virtual location. So if I'm in Australia, I can change my virtual location to the UK or the USA, so I can still watch movies like The Matrix on Netflix. And it's not just Netflix, or The Matrix, or Australia. Oh no. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in 100 countries. So wherever you are, you're gonna be able to access the content you wanna access. I literally use Surfshark every single day. Sharp and I have both done so for years. It's so handy to have that peace of mind whilst using the internet and to unlock content that I otherwise wouldn't be able to watch. And today Surfshark has a very tasty deal. All the spuds who sign up using my link, surfshark.com/jammy, will get a whole extra 4 months of Surfshark for free. And like I said, it's not just content. When you are booking your next flight to Australia or wherever, Surfshark can help you with that too. I had no idea this was a thing, but did you know that by changing your virtual location, you can unlock cheaper prices prices on things like flights, hotels, car rentals, and even everyday shopping, because many websites adjust their prices based on your country. And it's not just digital home comforts or the best prices that Surfshark can offer you. Oh no, it's also your safety. Whether you're at home, a coffee shop, all the way on the other side of the world, Surfshark encrypts your online data so you don't become an easy target for identity theft, phishing attempts, or fraud. And if that's not enough, Surfshark One gives you access to features like alert and search. So you'll get real-time data breach alerts if your personal info leaks online, and you can browse ad-free with zero digital footprints using Surfshark's private search engine. So go click the link in my description box to get 4 extra months for free. And there's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there really isn't anything to lose. I will give you just a moment to go click that link. Go give it a little click. Thank you. And now we're going to go back to the video. So now it's time to dive into some specific examples of this transphobia in film and TV. And I've already mentioned things like The Silence of the Lambs and Psycho, but one of the other most well-known, I'd say in my opinion, examples of quite horrible transphobia in a relatively modern movie is Ace Ventura. And by modern, I mean within my lifetime. It's still quite old, but it's still uncomfortable to know that there was this level of transphobia a few decades ago, and that it was just perfectly acceptable. So when finding out that a character is a trans woman, Ace Ventura vomits in disgust a lot, proceeds to brush his teeth with a comically large amount of toothpaste, and even uses a plunger on his face to throw up more. I don't know, it's very bizarre.
Einhorn is a man!
There's also the term of saying she's actually a man, and this definitely reinforces to viewers that trans women are just men who are pretending to be women, and that it's okay to be disgusted by them, and that it's funny, and that disgust is funny, and this reaction is some kind of comedic moment in the movie that's to be laughed at. Later on, it gets even worse when Ace is revealing to a group of mostly police officers that Lois, the trans woman, is a trans woman. They all respond in disgust, many of them spitting on the floor, having looks of horror on their faces, and generally just acting like this is the most awful and horrific and terrifying thing that they could have found out. But to reveal who she truly is, Ace just strips her down to underwear and exposes her, and it's just such an uncomfortable scene to watch.
Would a real woman be missing these?
See, I'd known about the transphobia in Ace Ventura, and I deliberately avoided watching it because of that. And I did not know about this particular scene until I was doing the research for this video, and I saw that, and I was like, oh my god. I knew it was bad from the descriptions and the little bits I'd seen, but that is... You can almost see the building blocks in these older movies to where the attitudes around trans people are now. These attitudes that used to be kind of just there, unspoken. They were a joke in a movie, they were a bit, they were a punchline, and now it's the rhetoric that's being used to literally strip away trans people's rights. Now in Ace Ventura, Lois, the trans woman, is the murderer. She is the villain. Surprise, surprise. Again, trans people being shown as the villains. But something that I found personally unclear when reading about the movie and looking into it is whether Lois was actually meant to be a trans woman in the film and the storyline, or if she's genuinely being posed within the film as a man pretending to be a woman to get away with a crime, but who actually still views themselves as a man but dresses as a woman to hide their identity. Ugh. Either way is awful, and both reinforce the false narrative that trans women are dangerous, and reinforce the other false narrative that trans women are just men pretending to be women, particularly for nefarious reasons. In this case, it was to get away with a crime. We're seeing now the claim that trans women are just men pretending to be women to access women's spaces. I mean, this is not something that happens, but you can absolutely see where this belief has been built from, if this is the messaging that people have had over their lives about trans women. And the level of disgust that we see from Ace Ventura and other characters in the movie when they found out that somebody is a trans woman is something that we see in multiple other examples. Another prominent example from a much more recent movie, The Hangover Part 2, which came out in 2011, is where Stu, one of the characters, gets intimate with a trans woman, and that was done whilst he was under the influence and he can't remember the next day. And there's this scene where he finds out and his friends find out, and there is a lot of horror and shame.
Yeah, you're loving at me. My bottom. Oh, God.
He's not just distraught over the fact he's cheated on his fiancée, but seems even more distraught specifically over the fact that he slept with a trans woman. And the level of shame that he portrays and horror that his friends have and the discomfort surrounding that, again reinforces this notion that being intimate with a trans person is definitely a negative thing to do and you shouldn't do it, and oh my goodness, shameful. And throughout the movie this continues with this level of like, it's something that he should be ashamed of, it's something that he should try and block out and push back and forget and never speak about. This tells viewers that being intimate with a trans woman, finding a trans woman attractive, is not something you should do. This is something that you should feel a great level of shame for and be disgusted at yourself about and try and block out and forget. This is horrible. This has definitely fed into the narrative of a lot of cis men in particular being anything from rude and dismissive to violent, incredibly violent, when they find out that they found a trans woman attractive, and violent towards that trans woman specifically. And it also feeds into the narrative that trans people are inherently unattractive and unlovable, which is absolutely not true. We see another example in Family Guy, which is not surprising that we see this kind of transphobia in Family Guy, but Glenn Quagmire calls somebody a transvestite and tells them to back off.
Whoa, transvestite, back off.
Quagmire is for all intents and purposes a character who is obsessed with adult fun times, and there's multiple instances of him assaulting and harassing women throughout the show. But even to this abhorrent character who is constantly making pretty much wholly unwanted advances towards women, even he, this horrible character, finds the idea of being with a trans woman disgusting. In Disaster Movie, not a movie I'd ever seen or heard of, and if I'm honest, it looks like the biggest pile of crap, a character finds out that the princess is a trans woman. The language used is so bad. I'm just gonna let you watch the clip and then we'll have a chat.
My dear prince, you have defended my honor.
Kiss me, baby. You a dude?
I'm a I thought you knew.
Again, disgust, discomfort, disbelief that she's trans, and also immediately exclaiming that, oh, you're actually a dude? And then the princess character, by losing her wig, has suddenly completely changed appearance and uses the T-slur. This clip definitely sends the message that trans women are just men in wigs. If there could be a movie that portrayed perfectly the ridiculous notion that transphobes have of like,
a man is just gonna put on a wig and infiltrate women's spaces.
Disaster Movie kind of does that. Oh, it's awful. Why did I make this video? And talking of the T-slur, which is used here, and like, I always just find it so incredibly jarring whenever I hear it. It just pops up. And I remember the very first event I went to after COVID meant that we could go to events. It was to see a movie called Cop Shop. Came out in 2021, so this is how recent we're talking. The movie's not anything about trans people. They're not mentioned ever, aside from this really bizarre, absolutely unwarranted and unnecessary transphobic joke, where the language used is just all kinds of inappropriate. And I'm just sat there, and it completely changed the vibe of the movie. I was really enjoying it, and I was like, what? Why did you have to think that you needed to rely on transphobia to have a funny moment? Fair. If you want to show that transphobia exists within these types of environments, then show somebody saying something transphobic, but show it being called out. Show the viewer that that is not okay to do. But no, it was just like this casual conversation between two cops, and one of them was just transphobic for no reason. It was very bizarre. But talking of other examples that use the T-slur, this is from Peep Show,
She's no
Sex and the City, The Social Network, Sons of Anarchy,
Dealer.
It's Always Sunny, and so, honestly, so many more. It's like it was a cool word to say. Like,
Oh, just said the T-slur. How hilarious am I?
and not all of these are super old instances. We're not talking about the 80s or the 90s. We're talking about the 2010s for a lot of these. And the T-slur isn't the only negative language that's used frequently to refer to trans people within film and TV. With Dexter, which is a show I personally love, and I rewatched it recently and I'd completely forgotten that this was a thing. There's just a use of a very classic term that should not be said and is seen as offensive to a majority of people.
Masuka's lab work is more pressing. I need him to hold down the fort here at the station.
He totally saw the sheep stuff.
And within this, it's depicted that the character Masuka, who watches trans adult content, should be ashamed by it. Again, we're seeing this shame and disgust and this negativity around finding trans people attractive. And it goes to the extent that Masuka even assumes that he's been bumped off of a case and penalized for the fact that it was discovered he watched trans women adult content. Yeah, how terrible. You watch some trans adult content and you'll lose your job. And in TED 2, again, not surprised that it came up here.
You sick bastard! Look at this! Chicks with. Oh my god! Oh my god! I have a disease, all right? I need help! There are no chicks with Johnny, only guys with.
Oh, this is such a relief. You know, I'm glad I'm finally caught. I wanted to be caught.
Johnny, now you listen to me. This is a wake-up call, all right? You gotta get back out there and meet somebody because you are spiraling out of control here.
All right, fine. I will. Just stop looking at that shit, please.
Johnny, I mean it, all right? The next chick you meet, you are getting back in the game.
Fine, I got it. Done.
All right. Now let's get rid of this.
What do you mean? We'll just delete the files.
No, that shit can always be recovered. We gotta smash your laptop with a hammer.
This is another example of a character being shamed or feeling shameful or being made to feel disgust and embarrassment that they watch trans adult content. And the language around that is also very derogatory, including misgendering trans women and just referring a lot to genitals. Like, I swear so many cis people are just obsessed with trans people's bodies, but then completely horrified if they found a trans person attractive. So Dexter, The Hangover, the Disaster movie, TED 2, they all show that attraction to trans women is something to be ashamed of and to hide and to forget about, and just not something that you want to do or be found doing. Away from slurs and the general attitude of finding trans people gross, there's also just a lot of like random little bits that come up in various shows and films that just highlight the fact that it's okay to disrespect trans people or use old-fashioned language or make trans people the butt of a joke. Victorious had a scene of a character using a trans woman's name in bunny quotes.
There it is. There she is. Oh, right. Cars are called she. Not just cars. Not just cars? Also boats, airplanes. My Uncle Barbara.
As if it's not really her name. Like, no, we don't really respect that that's her name. This is kind of like, oh yeah, she wants to be called Barbara, but you know, she's not really Barbara. And Gilmore Girls use sex change operation as the punchline to a joke.
And after we have a heart attack, you tell us you were just kidding. You're having a sex change operation.
Mom, Dad, I'm not having a sex change operation.
It's just jarring. It's like when shows make no effort to do anything positive for the trans community or trans rep, throwing in a sex change joke or showing that it's okay to disrespect a trans woman's name is really not okay. It doesn't send out an accurate or fair message about the trans community. Like, oh, how horrifying would it be if I had a sex change operation? It's exhausting. I feel like rewatching nostalgic stuff or like kind of watching anything, like with the Cop Shop movie, which is literally 4 years old. As a trans person, it feels like such a minefield. And it is like this for multiple other marginalized communities, but obviously I'm speaking about this as a trans man and the transphobia that we see. It's so ingrained, it's so widespread, and it's so difficult to remember where it is, to know if there's something in it, because normally when it's like a throwaway, like if I'm trying to find this Cop Shop clip, which I don't have on hand right now, I can't just find it by being like, oh, Cop Shop did a transphobic joke and somebody have like really spoken outwardly about it. There's so many instances that go under the radar and never get noticed, and it's just kind of accepted that it's okay to make those kind of comments about trans people within media. And then as soon as we see some positive trans representation, oh, the bigots are up in arms over it and like,
Oh my god, no, the transes are taking over. How dare they have a nice, positive, fair representation for once. You didn't use the T-slur once in this movie. I hate it.
Anyway, when you put all this together, you can really see how film and TV over the past several decades have created this culture and these assumptions around trans people, that trans people are deceptive, disgusting, the butt of a joke, and really dehumanizing trans people to the point where oftentimes they're seen as people that are not worthy of dignity and respect within these movies, like with Ace Ventura stripping the trans woman down, like in Disaster movie, misgendering and with the wig coming off and all of that, and just the disgust shown by characters like Stu in The Hangover. These examples perpetuated harmful stereotypes. I'm and probably made a lot of people feel like they were justified in their transphobia, or justified in speaking and thinking about trans people in a certain way, or justified in the use of slurs because their favorite character on their favorite show used it. It's really good to see that we're going in a much more positive direction in recent years, and we're seeing a lot more authentic, nice trans representation. We're seeing trans actors cast in trans roles, like Laverne Cox in Orange is the New Black, like Elliot Page in Umbrella Academy, like Yasmin Finney in Heartstopper and in Doctor Who, and we're seeing their transness woven into the storylines in much more natural, positive, accurate ways. And I will do a video going into some of the more amazing trans rep very soon. I have got some videos on my channel about specific examples, including Heartstopper and including Chaos, that had a fantastic trans storyline. I really love that. How dare they cancel that show? But I'll do like a kind of compilation like I've done here, and a dissection of like a lot of different ones at some point soon. Let me know if you have examples, both of negative and positive, if you want me to cover some more of the negative side at some point. But do let me know if there's anything, and go comment that down below. But despite the fact that there is this big uptick in positive trans rep, we're seeing a huge amount of societal pushback against trans rights, which is really tricky right now. I do see it as a thing that's happening because trans people are actually making progress and being more visible in the world, and the bigots have gone,
Oh my god, this cannot happen. I'm terrified.
and I do see it as like a very shitty wave that we're having to ride, but we will come out the other side. And there's just a lot of undoing, and there's a lot of repairing that needs doing that was caused by decades of terrible trans storylines and storytelling. So I'm hopeful for the future. I want to see it get better. Please, it has to, please get better. Yeah. If you like this video, think about giving a thumbs up and subscribing if you want to, but no pressure. Do go click that link down in the description box to check out Surfshark and get 4 months extra for free just for you and anybody else who clicks on the link. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. As always, I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.